So today my movie presentation is Dunkirk. Dunkirk wasn't the best war film that at this time, but it brings a warlike feeling to the audience, pulling them into a war environment, and it does so through its amazing sound use. So I want to talk about the sound in Dunkirk. For the first two clips, the sound in Dunkirk is mostly done in post-production, but this extraordinary use of sound that gives it a sense of realism, suspense, and immersion. One thing I noticed about in Dunkirk was the sound in the movie frequently revolve around timing. There is a ticking sound, just as the other classmates show in the first class. There's a ticking sound constantly throughout the entire film. As a ticking runs up, so does the viewer's heartbeat. It is interesting that in an interview, the Hans Zimmer, the composer for the Dunkirk film sound and music, that he told us that the ticking sound he used at the very beginning of Dunkirk is actually a recording of a watch that Christopher Nolan owns. And another motif was the step sound effect, usually heard as bullets suddenly flying and bombs explode out of nowhere. And this creates suspense because constant surprise keeps the audience on their toes. So now let's take a look on the first two scenes on Dunkirk. One is the opening scene and following is the beach bombing. The opening scene set the tone for the whole film and we can feel the desperation as soon as the movie begins. So the major sound is the sound of flies made by Germans. It flying around throughout the first minute. It is continuous, like wherever you went, there are flies flying around. It creates a feeling that they're surrounded by German, as if they're in a cage. And you can also hear some birds and wind, the sound of the birds and the wind, indicating that this is an empty city, and the fear begins to grow. Most of the film sound is realistic sound in the beginning, focusing on the soldiers' interaction with the surrounding props. In the background, there's this strange pipe sound, like blowing a wind into an empty pipe, creating this horror-like suspense. Flies everywhere. Birds again. Yeah, and suddenly the gunshot begins. You can hear bullets pierce through the metals, and the purpose of the sound was to join the viewers just as the troops would have. This established a connection between the characters and the viewers that you were both being shocked and both stepping into the unknown and both being chased by the enemies. So this is the first round of gunshots. Oh, and just after these characters climb out the fence, the clicking starts, like the ticking starts. The Hans Zimmer scores for Dunkirk start with the sound of ticking. This gives the illusion of an increasing intensity or pace, as the viewer is reminded that the soldiers don't have much time to escape, while the enemies is still closing in. Can't. I don't know if you can hear it. It's like tick 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 in the background, and there's another round of gunshots. It's like always reminding him that they was running out of time. And here you can see from behind that after he hid behind the trash bin, the clock went slowly, like tick 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 tick. You can tick 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 tick. So the pace is like basically slow, like tick 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 tick. But then after he going back to the sandbags, the clock start to run fast. Tick 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 tick. You can hear the tick 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 tick, like the ticking is starting to run faster than he hiding behind the trash bin. This creates this rising tension. And then suddenly the bullets begin again. Like this is different to a technique used in The Dark Knight. The Christopher Nolan used low-pitch instrument sound when a conflict is about to occur, which prepares the audience for what is to come. However, even though Dunkirk is in some part does the same, but it prefers to surprise the viewers instead of foreshadowing the suspense. Then follow the character footsteps, gradually take the lead, the sound of the bullet fade out and create the depths, while the tickings remains there. You can always hear the tickings throughout the whole film. Now the main sound is the footsteps down and the tickings down. Tick 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 tick. Okay, before I show you guys the next chapter of the videos, I want to let you guys listen to the song that used in the next chapter of video first. So there are two major components. One is a da 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 da, and the tick 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 tick, like the ticking sound, and the main like orchestra or something. And in an interview, the Nolan confirms that a lot of the soundtrack was built around the shepherd tone. The ticking makes way for an overwhelming orchestra that seems like it is rising higher and higher, but never actually reached the top. It is so tense it makes you cling to a seat. But what exactly is the shepherd tone? This video may have some explanation to it.
That is because Zimmer is taking advantage of an auditory illusion caused by something called a shepherd tone. It consists of several tones separated by an octave layered on top of each other. As the tones move up the scale, the highest pitch tone gets quieter, the middle pitch remains loud, and the lowest bass pitch starts to become audible. Because you can always hear at least two tones rising in pitch at the same time, your brain is tricked into perceiving a constant ascending tone. Loop it all together, and it sounds like a piano scale going on for infinity. When the transition between tones is continuous, it's called a shepherd reset glissando, and it can sound really spooky. This can happen in the opposite direction too. You can hear it in the endless stairs in Super Mario 64, and in Pink Floyd. It's like a barber's pole of sound, constantly seeming to rise without actually going anywhere. Put that in a soundtrack, and it creates the sound.
Yes, it was also used in lots of Christopher Nolan's films, the shepherd tone. And so let's now begin watching the famous The Mole chapter. the tickiness every time they're in the background, and this rising orchestra.
Grenadiers, mate.
That is one very rare dialogue in throughout the first 5 minutes. The tickiness going up, tick, 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 tick. The suspense is going higher, 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 and higher. And now it is deadly silent. It was all silent till the plane emerges and getting closer. Like the silence is like preparing something to happen. It's deadly silent. And then now the plane is coming down. So you can feel the desperation as the crews. There's an intensity and like a pressure on you. Now, while the booming from far to close, the background has this intense sound photos as well. If you can pay close attention to it, you can hear it. And when the dust settled, the sound disappeared too. Like the suspense and tension he built, like suddenly drop and suddenly disappear. Throughout the movie, there's also very little dialogue, as you can see from the beginning. Security of which makes little dialogue more powerful, and in some busy scenes, it can be hard to understand what the characters say, and this was done to add realism to the film, since in reality we aren't just keep talking and talking, especially in a war occasion. They are all concentrating on one thing, which is to run, hide, and survive. There are also other films such as Saving Private Ryan issues most of its factions to the audience has to the characters through dialogue. The dialogue specifies who the viewer should care for and focusing the audience on these in particular. But Dunkirk is different. It allows the viewers to feel for the Allied troops, understanding their struggle and rooting for them. Furthermore, while using vocals is an effective way of conveying and creating emotion, Dunkirk uses different techniques to achieve the same through the use of shepherd tone, which I talked before. So the overall score feels dark, and even as the miracles of Dunkirk actually happened and the dust settles, all the string section swells up and you will feel relieved, but the score just never seems to have an end. It's stated that this moderate level of intensity, like the ticking, the timing, and the scooping, from the beginning to the end, as if the plot is never resolved or it has never reached its conclusion. And I think it is because it mirrors the sentiments of the British soldiers, since yes, most were able to escape, but at the end of the day, or say at the end of this movie, the war was not over and there wouldn't be for the next couple of years. So that is the film sound analysis for Dunkirk. I really love Hans Zimmer's and I really love the film sound behind this Dunkirk, and it really creates tensions. And it have the perfect techniques to combine the film music and film sound to the real films, like the images, and they're combined really, really well. That is end of my presentation. Thank you.